Just as a little aside, if any of you are intrigued to begin reading your Bible, start with Mark's Gospel, what I just read, the first couple verses. Mark is the shortest gospel. I think it's the easiest to understand, but it's very intense. Just be careful if you read Mark's Gospel, because Mark is presenting Jesus and calling us to be disciples. But according to Mark, if we want to be a disciple, we have to be willing to be martyred. That's the whole focus of Mark in 16 chapters. So I want to begin today, as I started the liturgy, about talking about this highway. And again, as I repeat, it's not a physical highway. It's a spiritual highway, if that's the way to talk about it. And just pretending that God is up there and we're down here. It's a highway from God into our hearts. Now, I think most of us would understand that part of it, but I'm going to continue on later. But now, remember that highway is not physical. It's spiritual, or I don't know what other words to use. And just to, I'm sure most of you think about this already, but in case you don't, let's consider those four qualities of that highway. Because Isaiah says that we have to fill in the valleys. If you imagine the highway with valleys. And if we consider it spiritually, obviously it's not a physical valley, but it could be a valley of self-pity. The woe is me, everything, I don't get what I want. It could be the valley of depression. Could be the valley of negative thinking. I bet we all know people who are always searching out the negative in life. That might be a valley. And you might add to this, but just to get your imagination started. The mountains. The lower the mountains. Obviously, the one that comes up always first are the mountains of pride. The mountains of self-sufficiency. That's certainly something so prevalent in our society. We all want to be our self-sufficiency. The mountains of anger. Another one that is right on the edge of things going on all the time. The mountains of me first. We live in a me society. Got to lower those mountains. The uneven ways. That's the desert. Now remember, the desert is not just all wonderful sand like we see in the movies. Go to the Holy Land and go out into the desert where John was. It's extremely rough, rocky, mountainous. So, those uneven ways could be the highs and lows of life. Some people are always going up and down that emotional ladder. Could be the rough ways of loneliness, or the hurts that we endure and we hang on to, or bitterness, or the remembering of those hurts that we don't forgive. Those are some of our rough ways. And the last, uneven ways. And the rough ways, I put down in my little notes here, could be the hardness of heart, that we don't have to change. It could be our fears, our worries, or that whole attitude of get out of my way. Now again, those are just some things to get us started to thinking, and please fill in as you might think about your own personal life. Now remember, that highway is from God into our hearts. And I'm firmly convinced spiritually that we put barriers on that highway so God can't come closer to us. Don't you do that? Because we're not stupid. We know that if we let God into our hearts more fully, God is going to expect us to change. God is going to demand of us greater sacrifice than we are already doing, and perhaps we are unwilling to do. Some saint, I couldn't find out who it was, but some saint is famous for saying, God, make me a saint, but not yet. You know what that means. We all want to be the saints by the time we give our last breath. But we don't want it too soon because, again, we know it's going to make demands of us. But that's that highway. And what do we do so God can't get closer to us? That's why so many times Christmas has little impact on our lives. Advent is the time to prepare. And if we're not willing to clear that highway, well, then Christmas can have no effect, because Christmas is the greater coming of God into our lives. Now, that's the first part. And I think most of us could relate to that, and most of us could say, yes, I want God into my life. Why? Usually, so our life will be better. That's part of the humanity of it all. Those of us who are old remember that we were taught in catechism long time ago, what's the main purpose of life is to get to heaven. Save our souls. Some of you remember that? That's extremely selfish. And I do not think that that's the message of Jesus. We are not here just to save our souls. I mean, that's not the primary purpose. Advent, the coming of the Lord into our hearts, is to change us so that through us the message of Jesus would be more prevalent in the wilderness of our world. So our main concern cannot be ourselves. Our main concern must be the needs of others. Isn't that what Jesus did? And if Jesus did it, he asks that of us, his followers. And that's the irony of it. As we seek to help and save others, we will be saved. But if we're just in it for ourselves, I don't know if it's going to happen. That's the contrast between John the Baptizer and Jesus. You know, you heard the gospel. John came and the people confessed their sins. That's the first part. But then Jesus came to show us the way of salvation. John baptized with water. Jesus wants to baptize us with the Spirit. Remember that the Spirit is not a commodity. It's not something we can grasp. We talk about when young people are confirmed, now they got the Spirit. No, I don't think so. They have the potential, because it's not something concrete. Think about that, at high school and the college pep rallies. The cheerleaders will say, have you got that Spirit? Well, it's not something we possess, it's something we manifest. Sometimes we have it, sometimes we don't. But we only have it when we use it and share it with others. That's where the highway of our God, first, of course, has to come to us. But then the challenge is that it has to pass through us by our words and our attitudes and our actions to benefit others. Pass through us so that others will benefit by that Spirit that we share with those around us. John went out in the wilderness. We live in a wilderness, don't we? Whether it is in our society here in the U.S. or around the globe, most of our governments are dysfunctional. Here, North Korea, what are they thinking? Middle East, Israel, Palestine. Most of our leaders are merely self-centered and self-serving individuals. Even our institutions are discredited. Education, finance, even our church, going through times of losing our moral authority. Even our spiritual fiber, our human community is frayed. So that's the wilderness in which we live. And it's into that wilderness that we're to bring the message of Jesus. And that's a message of unselfish love. If we are willing to allow this God to penetrate us and then to influence the way we act and our concerns, our worries, to include the needs of others, then the Christ event will happen. That's Christmas. Not necessarily on December 25th, but whenever we allow it to change us to be more present in our wilderness. We are baptized not with water, but the possibility of God's Spirit. And may it happen.